For more years than he could remember, Elijah Boone woke up to the same silence. The kind that presses against a man's chest like an invisible weight. The kind that no amount of open land can soften, because loneliness doesn't care how wide the sky is. His ranch sat at the edge of the red desert where grass fought for life and the wind sang old, broken songs through cracked fences and dry cottonwood trees. Elijah had come here as a young man with hope stitched into his bones, chasing freedom, running from memories of war, betrayal, and a town that buried its people before the ground ever did. Over the years, the ranch grew. Cattle came and went, seasons changed, but people did not. The nearest settlement was half a day's ride away, and even when Elijah went there for supplies, he felt more like a ghost than a man, spoken to politely but never known. Nights were the worst. He would sit on his porch with a cup of bitter coffee, watching the stars spill across the sky, wondering how a man could be surrounded by such beauty and feel so completely invisible. He had once believed solitude was strength, that a man alone could not be hurt, but time taught him otherwise. Solitude, when stretched too long, becomes a slow poison. One late afternoon, as dust rose on the horizon and the sun burned low, Elijah noticed movement near the canyon trail. Figures moving not like ranch hands or travelers, but with quiet purpose. His hand instinctively went to the rifle leaning by the door. Apache lands bordered his ranch, and though conflict had eased over the years, mistrust still lived in the bones of both sides. When the riders came closer, Elijah saw it was a small Apache group, scouts by the look of them, and at their front rode a young woman with fierce eyes and a posture that spoke of strength earned, not borrowed. She dismounted without fear and approached him while the others stayed back. Her presence unsettled him, not with threat, but with something deeper, something unfamiliar. She spoke his name, surprising him, and said they had watched him for years, watched him treat the land with respect, watched him turn away violence when others would not. Her name was Ayanna. She told him their water source had begun to dry, and they sought passage through his land to reach the river beyond. Elijah agreed without hesitation, offering supplies as well, because kindness had become his quiet rebellion against a hard world. As days passed, the Apache group camped nearby, and Ayanna returned often, sometimes with questions about the cattle, sometimes with silence and shared glances that lingered too long to be meaningless. She listened when Elijah spoke, really listened, not as a courtesy but as if his words mattered, as if his past was not something to be endured but understood. One evening, as the sky turned fire orange and shadows stretched long across the dirt, Ayanna stood beside him watching the horizon. She spoke softly, telling him that loneliness has a sound, and she had heard his long before she ever saw him. Elijah felt something crack open inside his chest, a place he had boarded up years ago. When she said, "I want to be closer to you," it wasn't said with flirtation or fear, but with honesty so raw it stole his breath. Yet with those words came danger, because in the Wild West, closeness carried consequences, and Elijah knew that caring for her could mean war with men who feared what they didn't understand. As the night settled in and coyotes cried in the distance, Elijah realized that the greatest risk he could take was not fighting, but opening his heart again. And as this chapter of his life closed, the question was no longer whether he could survive alone, but whether he dared to live connected. And if this story already pulls you in, if you feel the weight of the silence and the spark of something new, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this only grow deeper from here. The days following Ayanna's confession were heavy with unspoken truths, each glance carrying more meaning than words dared to hold. Elijah tried to bury himself in work, writing fence lines, tending cattle, repairing old beams on the barn, but her presence followed him like a shadow that warmed instead of chilled. She moved through his land with quiet respect, never taking more than needed, never acting as if she did not belong, and somehow that made her presence feel natural, inevitable. At night, Elijah lay awake listening to the wind, wrestling with the fear that had kept him alone for so long, the fear of loss. He had lost brothers in war, lost love to illness, lost faith in promises that men swore would last forever. Loving Ayanna meant risking all of that again and more. It meant standing between two worlds that history had taught to hate each other. Trouble came sooner than he hoped. A group of armed settlers arrived one morning, accusing the Apache of trespassing, their words sharp with ignorance and old anger. Elijah stood between them, rifle lowered but voice firm, stating clearly that the Apache were under his protection while crossing his land. Tension hung thick as gunsmoke, and one wrong move could have ended everything. Ayanna stepped forward then, not as a warrior, but as a woman who understood courage in its truest form. She spoke of shared land, shared survival, of how the earth did not belong to one man or one people. Her words did not soften every heart, but they planted doubt where hatred had once stood firm. The settlers left, muttering threats, but violence did not come that day. Later, by the riverbank, Ayanna told Elijah that closeness was not just about love. It was about choosing each other, even when the world pushes back. Elijah finally spoke the truth he had been hiding from himself. He told her he was afraid not of death but of hope. Ayanna smiled sadly and said hope is always dangerous, but without it a man is already gone. When the Apache prepared to move on, Elijah felt the familiar ache of abandonment rising again, but this time he did not let silence decide his fate. He rode with them to the edge of the canyon, and there, beneath a sky painted with dawn, he told Ayanna that his ranch was no longer just a place of work, but a home that could grow if she wished it. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she took his hand, grounding him in the present, and said closeness does not always mean staying, it means belonging. Weeks later, Ayanna returned alone, not as a visitor but as a choice. The ranch changed after that. Not overnight, not magically, but slowly, honestly. Laughter found its way back into the walls. Stories replaced silence. Elijah learned that strength was not found in isolation, but in shared burdens and shared dreams. And as he stood one evening watching the sunset beside Ayanna, he knew that loneliness had not defined his life. It had only prepared him to recognize connection when it finally arrived. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even the loneliest roads can lead somewhere meaningful, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because many more powerful Wild West stories of love, courage, and destiny are waiting for you.